Hello, this is a short tutorial on budgeting and really a guide to asking for everything for the eTech 5230 class on grant writing. When you start grant writing, you're going to come to lesson 5, which is budgeting. And in that lesson, you're going to specifically find a budget worksheet. And within that budget worksheet, you're going to detail out exactly what you need for your budget. And so, what we want you to do is think about all the little stuff that you need that connects to the bigger stuff. This has been a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody. It's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for everyone who writes a grant, is to remember the little things that go in or the things that are connected to the things that we really need, so that if we receive the grant, we're not spending money out of our own pocket for things that we just forgot to put in. So when you look at this worksheet, you can see many different areas. And what we're specifically going to look at are things like facilities and equipment, materials, travel, communication, the individual cost for these items. Let me go back up here. My apologies. So in order to do this, we really want to emphasize that if you give a mouse a cookie. So if you haven't read this book, if you click on this link, it'll take you to an audio reading and a visual reading of the book. But if you remember the book, it's if you give a mouse a cookie. So if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to need a glass of milk. And if you give him a glass of milk, he's going to need a straw. If you give him a straw, he's going to need a napkin. And if you give him a napkin, then he's going to want to look in the mirror to see if he has crumbs on his face. And so this kind of gives you a good idea of what to look for when you're looking at a grant, is the trail to follow. So anytime that you start going through a grant, start thinking about this children's book. If you give a mouse a cookie, what will it need? And good example of this that we've seen in the past, what does your mouse need? So let's say, for example, that your project is a STEM lab and you're asking for laptops or iPads. What goes with the laptops or iPads? If I give someone a laptop, what do I need? Well, I need to be able to charge it. So I need to make sure that I have all the charging equipment. If I ask for 30 laptops, I probably need a charging station. Apologies. I probably need a charging station so that I don't, let me get back where I am. So that I don't, so I'm not individually charging each laptop one at a time. And I'm probably going to need protective cases, especially for iPads. If people are going to take iPads or I'm going to carry an iPad somewhere, I need a protective case to be able to carry that in. If I ask for tables, I'm going to need chairs. If I have a table with those chairs, I may need a butcher paper on those tables, or I may need tablecloths. Do I want the tables damaged? How might the tables be damaged? And so that's the train of thought that I want you to think about as you go through this grant. Ask for what you need. Make sure that you're asking for what you need. So another example of a good grant that was written was a rescue shelter for horses. You have to think along that path. If my goal is a rescue shelter for horses, then I have to think, well, we have to put them somewhere. They have to have a physical shelter. What am I going to feed them? So they need hay and food. Well, if I have hay and food, what does that hay and food need to go into? I obviously have to have food containers, or I have to have some way to haul hay. I have to have some way to be able to distribute the food. I need a water container or water systems animals need to drink. I also need vet visits. So if I have a vet visit that comes in, they probably need preventative medicine, annual shots, biannual shots, whatever it may be. And so you can see the train of thinking. So as you go through your grant, write your grant, and then when you're looking at that budget, start going through and start thinking about the process, the connection process. So I wanted to show you a sample grant that I have. It's a very rough draft of what I've done. And this is what I do when I write a grant. This is a rough draft, and actually it's probably 3 or 4 progressions into a rough draft. And you may just have one progression into a rough draft as you're doing this. But I wanted to give you an insight to what I do. So I'm saying this is for a summer academy, and this was funded. So I pulled up just the key academic enrichment activities so that I could give you a piece of what I do. So I'm saying that I want them to have interactive, tactile, kinesthetic experiences. I'm right here. And that they'll participate on a strategy to design and build robots to a predetermined, well, this makes me think, okay, I know if I don't have robots already, I know I have to have a robot. So I may come out here and put do I have the robots? Or I may come out here and like put a little, that's just a note to myself. That's something that needs to go in the budget. Through the design process, they're given engineering notebooks. Well, I need to do engineering notebooks, designing. I need art supplies. So I would do the same thing. I would insert another comment here and say budget supplies. That's just so that I remember that I've got to come back here and do this. Online design programs. What program am I going to use? So I would do the same thing. What program? Or if I know the program, I can say Robot C, Easy C, and I can make little notes to myself. You get the idea, because sometimes we look at the overall grant and we look at the really big picture, and then when we try to come back into the smaller pictures, it becomes a little bit more difficult, and we need to just come right back down into that very minute detail. This is the easiest way that I have found. This processing, my process and how I do it, may trigger a different way for you to do it, the best way for you to do it, but there are different ways that you can go through this and do it. Participants required scientific draw and label. Well, I have to make sure that we have pencils, pens, drawing pads. Okay, you get the idea. If I were just to write this, I would say, oh, I just need some supplies. I don't want to go back and buy pencils and pens and markers and all of those supplies on my own dime. So that's why we need to look through this and be very, very careful about what the connections are that we make. Technological tools such as online programs, where we talked about that 3D printer. Oh, I've got to make sure that I have a 3D printer. And if I have a 3D printer, what do I need? Roto printer, I probably need extra filament because they're going to use a lot. I probably need to make sure that I have a rolling area for the filament. Not filament correctly. There we go. So you get the idea. Now when I go back and I'm looking at my budget again, and I'm talking about my budget, which is down here, I can make sure that I have covered all of these things and they're not just extra pieces floating around. So that is if you give a mouse a cookie, and it's just a little insight into a few tips that can get you going and that can make sure that you're asking for every single thing that you need so that money is not out of your pocket.